What's up, folks? Sean, the Average Angler, coming at you with another great video today. We've got a good one. But first, I'd like to find out a little bit about you guys, tell you a little bit about me. Just something we haven't really talked about. The BASS ruling, B-A-S-S. How many of you enjoy watching tournament fishing? I know not everybody does. Me personally, I love it. I pretty much focus on the 5-fish format. It's just every fish thing. Every once in a while, I'll watch it. I fish a 5-fish format. I kind of was brought up that way, so it just makes more sense in my head, and I get excited to watch it. But anyway, do you guys watch tournament fishing? Do you do tournament fishing? Let me know in the comments down below. All right, if you're new to the channel, you like this kind of content, hit that subscribe button down below. Help an old man reach his goals. All right, so today we're going to talk about a technique that, at least locally in my area of Northern California, quite honestly, I think it's overlooked by the vast majority. And that's okay with me, because quite honestly, it leaves more water out there for me and the few other people that do it, and that is deep diving crankbaits. Or, for that matter, basically diving crankbaits, right? They could be much smaller, because they come in all sizes, much like our square bills. And they can cover from depths of, let's say, 4 to 6 feet to 20 plus feet, even 28 feet, 40 plus feet. This one's kind of new to me. I haven't really got out and messed around with it yet, but so we won't talk about that one. But I do want to talk about these other ones, because, man, something about crankbaits as we turn to fall can be so effective. And depending on the body of water you're on, you could be throwing something like this little tiny Blitz DR, right? Doesn't run real deep. Small little crankbait. That is 45 millimeters. Little tiny guy. Just for reference, this one here runs, I think, 8 to 10. Okay. So crankbaits in the fall are great because fish are getting in that chasing mode. They still need to be triggered, because the summertime tend to get a lot of pressure. The fish get uncomfortable due to temperatures, but they need to eat because their metabolism's up due to warmer weather. So when this time of year comes around, like here, it's starting to cool off, okay? The temperatures are dropping, the water temperatures are dropping, outside air temperatures dropping, the wind's been blowing around here lately, and it's noticeably more comfortable. The other thing they do in Northern California, and I think actually through a lot of the country, is they start dropping water levels. Really a negative for the bass fishermen. Bass don't tend to like that a whole lot. Fish scatter, they move, they start moving around, looking for somewhere to get comfortable. If they were shallow, sometimes they'll either stay shallow if there's cover around for them, like grass or wood, or they could move out deeper to where they have a little bit more up and down movement, so that they're more comfortable while the water's falling. Now, these are the fish I like to target because they're not as affected by the lake dropping. They don't need to move every day, right? They move out to, say, 12 to 20 plus feet, and the lake dropping 4 inches isn't going to affect them near as much as that fish that might be in 1.5 feet to 2 feet. So that's my argument for fishing crankbaits. Now, we're going to talk about one of the prime zones in a lot of bodies of water. Might be that 12 to 16 foot. That's typically deep enough that the photosynthesis shades their eyes, the water penetration from the sun this time of year due to algae blooms, that kind of things, puts some color in the water, and most of the time you can't see down too far, and that's a pretty good depth for them to get into and be comfortable without the threat from above, meaning birds, sunlight, all that kind of stuff. So with that in mind, a crankbait I really like to start with, and that is underutilized probably, is a Strike King 5XD. It's not a big bait, pretty easy to throw. I throw this on a 705 to a 764, something like that. If you like a longer rod, go with a 7.6. If you like the shorter rod, 7 foot. And this is plenty for a 7 foot rod. It's not an overpowering crankbait. The weight on it's pretty average, I would say, maybe 5/8 of an ounce, something like that. And it's going to run down in those depths and present a moving reaction bait that's hunting, hitting bottom, deflecting, bouncing off, and it's going to trigger strikes. Now, I will say that for the most part, I want to go with a shad pattern when I'm searching. Okay, this is a 6XD. You'll notice it is a little bit bigger than its brother, the 5XD. It's also going to run a little deeper. Now, I don't get too worked up about the depth. What I do want to be doing is hitting bottom, and I'm going to tell you in a minute about an interesting day I had throwing a deep diving crankbait in real shallow water. With these crankbaits, will trigger strikes, help you find schools of fish. Then you can really dial in whether you fish that crankbait until they stop biting, which is what I usually do, and then I'll switch over to another presentation. Could be a drop shot, could be a Ned rig, could be a shaky head. My number one choice is a jig in most cases this time of year. Fish are really going to start transitioning to eating a jig this time of year, especially those bigger fish. For instance, we need to go deeper, then we just get an appropriate crankbait. One thing I want to point out, some crankbaits like this 6 cents 500 DD are a little more work to retrieve than this OSP Blitz Magnum EXDR. If you look at the lip, this one's kind of concave a little this way, right? So it really grabs the water to help pull it down. This one, on the other hand, kind of rolls off the outer edges. It's kind of rolled the other way. The bill's longer, but this bait is really easy to retrieve. Now, what am I retrieving these on? I typically like a 7-to-1, 7-3-to-1, 7-4-to-1, something like that. I throw mine on a Daiwa Tatula SV. Typically, with my crankbaits, I'm going to be throwing 14-pound test. Now, there is one exception for that, and that is if I find those fish to be shallow. I've thrown something like a 6XD in under 6 foot of water. And the reason being is that thing really digs and deflects, and there's a lot of bouncing and moving, and it triggers those fish to bite. Now, this doesn't happen all the time. It's just something to be aware of, that if you see these fish up shallow, you can't get them to bite, maybe that is something you want to try. But I've had them hit it so hard that way that they sucked it in through their mouth, went out their gill plate, and I hooked them on the side of the body. Craziest thing I've ever seen, but they will get really, really aggressive for a crankbait that's deflecting off a rock. Some guys may say they go down to 10-pound test, and there's times you might need to do that. I don't typically like to do that, especially since I fish at Clear Lake. 14-pound works really, really well, and most of these crankbaits these days are tested on 14-pound. If some are reaching for depth and trying to say it runs deeper than it really does, they might drop down to thinner diameter line to try and get it deeper. I just find what will run in what depths with the line I have. Okay, another great one, you need something quiet and stealthy, the Rapala DT series. These are fantastic and really good early in the year, wintertime and stuff. The nice thing about it is they all are DTs, right? Which means dives to, and then it'll have a number. This one happens to be a DT 14. So dives to 14 foot. In that case, I'm going to probably throw this in 10 to 12 feet. Again, I want that bait to be hitting bottom, bouncing off of the bottom and deflecting, and I don't want it to be too much work to get it down there. Now, there's a lot of different crankbaits you can use, and if you're new to crankbait fishing, don't have a lot of experience with it, the ones I really like that are inexpensive are the Strike King 5XD, 6XD. They're not overpowering to work. They dive fairly easy. They get down to depth. They catch fish. I think we're all familiar with a guy named Kevin Van Dam, and these were the tools of his trade, and they are very effective. Okay, they work really well. They got great colors, all the colors you really need. I think that one's Tennessee shad or gizzard shad, and of course the red craw. Now, speaking of the red craw, I will go to a craw pattern crankbait once I've located fish. This is something I may change to before I go to that jig. Just run it through there, and what I've found is oftentimes that craw pattern will get me the biggest fish out of the group. It doesn't tend to get a lot of bites because those fish are typically keyed on bait fish, but it does tend to get me the biggest bite out of the group, so it's a good thing to throw. That is a custom painted 6 cents 500 DD, I believe it's called. Okay, another one that I really like, again, they're going to tell you the depth on them, is the Berkeley Dredger. Again, a pretty easy one to get down to depths. Kind of reminds me of the Azuma with the forehead the way it is here. They've got this little cylinder lead in the lip to help it point down, to help it dive. And then on the bottom of the bait, it tells you what it is. It's a Dredger 14.5. These are very effective on all species of bass. Spotted bass love them. Look, that's a good size for a spotted bass. It's a good size for a smallmouth. And the largemouth eat them. So the Dredger is a great one as well to consider, depending on whether you like Strike King or Berkeley, or maybe you don't like any of them and you want to go with the OSPs and spend the big bucks, because these are all $20+. But they are very unique in the design, and they're lighter and thinner walled, so the sound is different. OSP also uses this little weight here in the middle. I think that's more for balancing than anything else. I'm not really quite sure. There's a long video out that tells you about it, but this is a great crankbait. And these smaller profiles are very effective if you have fish that eat smaller bait. Again, I showed you this other OSP Blitz DR, really borderline BFS type thing, right? I'd probably throw this on a spinning rod. This was a special edition one, definitely a spinning rod little crankbait. But crankbaits are a great way to trigger fish into biting when they're not really in the mood to bite. You cover a lot of water with them. You can cover a lot of the water column from deep to shallow. You just pick the appropriate crankbait for where it is you want to fish. Now, as I mentioned, I typically use 14-pound test. I don't want to have to baby these fish to the boat. If you're on a big tournament, busy weekend, lots of pressure, then I may drop down my line size to be a little more stealthy, get a little more depth, give that bait maybe a little bit more action than it may not have with that heavier line. But that's a special circumstance. And the rest of the time, I'm going to be throwing 14-pound test. Okay, it's stronger, it's got less stretch. It can take hitting rocks a little bit more than the lighter line, but the main thing is I don't want to have to baby that fish to the boat. These are treble hook baits, and very much like a swim bait, I don't like to give the fish more time than I have to fighting them back to the boat. So we've talked about the baits, the line, the rods. Oh, and on the rods, I am typically a glass composite type of guy. Okay, I just like the attributes of both. Glass is really hard to beat when fighting a fish, but it's not necessarily the best for castability and weight. Glass tends to be much heavier. Now, most of the time with the baits I showed you, I'm going to be in that 705, which is a 7-foot heavy glass composite rod. Very good rod, also can be used for chatterbaits, so you can use your chatterbait rod for this stuff. Don't have to go buy nothing special. The longer rods for those bigger baits where I really need to get a little extra distance out there to help them dive deeper. The longer the cast to get to their maximum depth. So, places I look for when fishing a crankbait: ledges, rock bottom, rock piles. That's pretty much the gist of it. Okay, creek channels, creek edges, somewhere where there's going to be some hard objects for you to deflect off to make that bait change direction and be erratic. That's usually when the strikes come. And I like to keep them in those areas as much as I can. The other thing is, we're coming to fall. Those fish are going to be migrating towards creeks, creek channels, and those kinds of things, following the bait. So that's why we want to be there. Okay, if you got any questions, drop them in the comments down below. We've been on this video for now over 15 minutes. If you're new to the channel, you're still here, you really should subscribe. We're practically friends now. Thanks for watching, taking the time out of your day. I'm Sean, the Average Angler. We'll see you on the next one.